What's up, Kaspa Warriors? Today we're going to be looking at the best way to play the Busch-Gass Gambit, which my opponent failed to play this afternoon. After pawn to e4, my opponent played e5. And when I played knight f3 with white, what did they do? Bishop c5. This is called the Busch-Gass Gambit. And it's a shame I couldn't recognize it when my opponent played it, probably due to the fact that I haven't paid much attention to it. After bishop c5, I simply took the free pawn on e5 with my knight. And this is when my opponent played bishop takes f2. At this point, I didn't see any meaningful continuation for black, so I just took on f2 with my king. My opponent simply played queen h4 check, if I'm not mistaken, after which I played king g1, and then later on retreated my knight back to f3, if I'm not mistaken. I think they didn't even take on e4. They played something like, I can't remember. But anyway, the main area of my meat in today's lesson is to show you the correct way to play this bishop c5 gambit, so-called the Busch-Gass Gambit, not the bushmeat. Ha ha ha, that was funny. So after knight takes e5, instead of sacrificing your bishop on f2, which is wrong, I propose you play this in the style of the Stafford Gambit, beginning with the move knight c6. And if white is not careful, oftentimes the game will be transposing back to the Stafford. Some people call this the Chiodini Gambit. The point is, after knight takes, now this is when you take back with your d pawn, indirectly paving the way for your light squad bishop if you think about it. And if white plays the top played move in the Lichess database, as you can see with your own eyeballs, bishop c4, this is when you can simply take on f2, not what my opponent did in the game. Point is, after king takes, as black, you simply continue with queen d4 check, and wherever the king goes, this is when you capture on c4. So this is one simple trick that is in the Busch-Gass Gambit, you guys. What did you achieve? Number one, you made white lose their right to castle. Number two, you're ahead in development with many open files. And number three, you're probably going to checkmate white very quickly. For example, if d3, you can go queen c5 if you want, develop your light squad bishop, then castle long. If you want to castle short, you just go knight e7 and simply castle short, because that knight will sit on g6 someday. Quick development is the key. Question: what's the difference between the Busch-Gass Gambit and the Stafford? See, the main difference between the two is the placement of this king's knight. In the Stafford Gambit, by move number 4, we already see this knight on f6. While in the Busch-Gass Gambit, we don't usually develop it so early. For example, after pawn to e4, e5, and knight to f3, instead of playing bishop c5, the Stafford begins with the Petrov defense or the Russian defense, where we develop our knight on f6, allowing white to take our free pawn. And instead of playing the main line d6, knight f3, and knight takes e4, we simply go knight c6, inviting white to take the knight as well, so that we take back with the d pawn. And after a common move like pawn to d3, this is when we play bishop c5. So there's a difference. And one of the best pioneers of the Stafford is none other than Eric Rosen. With this dubious opening, Eric has defeated a lot of people in both online games and over-the-board games, including grandmasters, and if I'm not mistaken, even super grandmasters. We see that in the Stafford, we usually have this knight on f6, while in the Busch-Gass Gambit, we first go bishop c5, and then our knight is still on g8, as you can see. So think of the Busch-Gass Gambit as a lower version of the Stafford Gambit. Anyway, once again, e4, e5, knight f3, bishop c5. Once again, if white takes and then you play knight c6, they take, feel free to take back. If bishop c4, you know what to do, just sacrifice your bishop and life is good. But if white plays something else, maybe let's say knight c3 in this position, there are so many things that you can do. For example, knight e7 and bishop e6. In fact, knight e7 is the main line, but just to be tricky, I love the move knight f6. It doesn't do much, but it works against real human beings. They have to find this pawn to h3 move right in this position. If they play something like bishop c4 here, just know you might be winning sooner than expected due to knight g4. Get it? Doesn't even matter even if they castle short. This is even worse due to queen h4. Look at this. You want to checkmate on h2, so they play pawn to h3. And now guess what? This is when you play knight takes f2. This is not even a sacrifice, by the way. White just lost a pawn. If rook takes, you just take with your queen, and after something like king h1 or whatever, you now follow it up with another cold-blooded move. Guess the move to play. Well, frankly speaking, there are many moves you can play. Bishop e6 is one of them, castle short, or whatever you want, but I find bishop g4 to be very tricky and confusing in that it almost traps white's queen. As you can see, the queen has no safe squares to go to. In fact, they can't even take that bishop like this due to mate in 1 on g1. And they can't even take this bishop with their pawn due to mate in 1. Once again, look at that. So the only sensible moves are moves like bishop e2 and knight e2. Oh, I forgot to mention that even queen f1 is playable in this particular position because the queen is defended by the light squared bishop. So it's up to you to exchange queens right away or just retreat your bishop to e6. Play bishop e6. After queen takes, you humbly take back like that. They are going to take on e6, but then you just take like that. So what's your advantage? Once again, quick development and a pair of rooks. Anyway, but wait, I said after knight c3, back on move 5, instead of continuing with the main line and castle short, you can try knight f6. But what if white plays the correct move in this position, pawn to h3, instead of what we saw earlier, bishop c4 or pawn to d3? Well, if they find this somehow, again, there are so many things you can do, but among many good things such as castle short, bishop a6, pawn to b5, I propose you play pawn to h6. You copy what white is doing for the time being. Remember, you are not down a piece, you're just down a pawn in an effort to be quick in development. At this point, your opponent will play something like pawn to d3. And now this is when you want to play something like bishop e6. Remember, quick development is key. Let's say bishop e2 is played and then you go queen e7. And after something like castle short, maybe you even castle long. What am I saying in this position? In the knight c3 line, if white finds the correct move, pawn to h3, it is time for you to start developing your queen side pieces as quickly as possible and castle long. You want to start attacking on the king side like that. Enough of the knight c3 line. What if white plays pawn to d3? I mean, after bishop c5, knight takes, knight c6, knight takes, d takes, and then pawn to d3 instead of knight c3 or bishop c4. Well, after pawn to d3, the normal line begins with knight e7 as always, and castle short. You want to put that knight on g6 someday. But as always, I just love knight f6, even if it's not good enough in this position, because there are some tricks behind this. If white thinks they can still play pawn to h3 as in the knight c3 line, well, this may become more trickier after bishop takes f2 with check, and after king takes, you go knight takes e4. White can't take back your knight due to queen takes. Worse off, if they play king g1, you can even draw simply by going queen d4 check, king f2, queen d6 check, king g1, queen d4 check, king h2, again queen d6 check. This is just a pure draw. If they become greedy with pawn to g3, that'll be met like that. Anyway, but you don't always have to sacrifice your bishop. Like after pawn to h3, you can just go bishop e6 and castle short. You'll be fine. If they don't play pawn to h3 and let's say they just continue playing normally bishop e2, funny enough, you can just go ahead and play knight g4 in this position. It is very safe. Looks like your knight is only defended once by your light squared bishop, so white can just take that. But nope, you simply have a good follow-up, queen h4. You just want to checkmate white on f2. If they play pawn to g3 for some reason, you oversimplify the game like this. Queen takes, and bishop takes g4. Why trading off your queen when you are down a pawn? 3 reasons. First, you are way ahead in development. Secondly, you still have your 2 bishops that are more powerful than bishop and knight, theoretically speaking. Thirdly, white has so many light square weaknesses. That queen trade was okay. Before I conclude, let's look at some of the ways in which white can try to decline the Busch-Gass Gambit after e4, e5, knight f3, bishop c5, and knight takes. At times, after you play knight c6, white won't take your knight. You will see that they'll play knight f3 because they just want to stay solid. But you see, when you're playing a gambit, you don't want to go back to the drawing board and start defending. Remember, quick development is the key. So you want to play this in the style of the Scandinavian. You go pawn to d5 right away, attacking that pawn. After e takes d5, you follow it up with queen takes d5. Yes, there is knight c3, but you can simply go queen d7. Others even prefer queen h5, which is my favorite. Bishop e2, bishop g4. Again, quick development. If pawn to h3, you just leave your bishop on g4 just like that. they won't take. Their rook is not protected. That's why they will castle short most of the times in this position. And now you simply castle long. Remember, quick development is the key. From here, you are going to be willing to open up the king side in whichever way you want. This time, if pawn to h3 comes, guess what? You can even take on h3, not even taking the knight. What if they play knight e1? Well, you simply go queen g6 and you'll be able to rescue your bishop. But what if they take your light squared bishop? Oftentimes it's going to be a draw due to your dark squared bishop. You first of all take on h3, and if knight h2, the top played move in the Lichess database, things are even bad. As you can tell, yes, they are planning to go bishop g4 check and win your queen. So this is why you need to play pawn to h5. Bingo. In this position, Stockfish thinks black is better, if not winning, as you can tell from the eval bar. What if they play bishop f3? These are moves that human beings play, by the way. And now you change your strategy. You go bishop d6 and white is dead. For example, knight g4, you don't take back due to bishop takes. You're going to lose your queen. So you first of all go knight f6. And it's just a matter of time before you checkmate them like that. Bishop g2, queen h4, you don't even need to take back the knight. That's already a dead piece. And you have checkmate pending on h2. That's why you play queen h4 if white plays bishop g2. Anyway, once again, after knight f3, bishop c5, knight takes, knight c6, and knight f3, you just go pawn to d5. After ed, you take back with your queen. Simple. Knight c3, as always, you go queen h5. Bishop e2, bishop g4. This time, if they don't castle short, making things simpler for you, like that, you might see them playing pawn to d4 first, harassing your dark squared bishop. But once again, you can just castle long, because they can't take that bishop, if you think about it. If they play bishop e3, for some reason, there are so many things you can do. Knight f6, knight h6, even pawn to f5. You just want to be way ahead in development. Remember, that's the key of any gambit. With this move, you just want to go pawn to f4 and probably take on d4 someday. Things may go wild. Maybe, let's say white plays knight a4. Here you can even take on d4, knowing full and well that after knight takes, you have bishop takes d4, say bishop takes, f takes, bishop takes, and queen e8 check. You're going to win back a piece. Lastly, after you play bishop c5 and say white doesn't take on e5, just know that the game will transpose back to the Italian or just any other opening. It's no longer going to be a gambit. For example, you can see in the Lichess database, the top played move here is bishop c4. Maybe due to the fact that people are just blazing out moves in the opening stage or pre-moving in the opening stage. So maybe they don't see this sacrifice on move number 2. But anyway, if they play bishop c4, just know the game may get back to the Italian. And the simplest you can do is to play knight c6 in this position, turning the game back to the Gyoko piano, or just going pawn to d6. Every coin has two sides. If your gambit doesn't work, play chess. So you go knight c6, and this is now the Gyoko piano or the Gioco piano Italian game. So it's up to white to play the c3 Italian Gioco pianissimo style with pawn to d3 later and bishop b3, or the d3 Italian. At this point, pray that your opponent plays pawn to d3, which I call the d3 Italian game, because now you can easily transpose the game back to the Lucchini Gambit, which I presented in the video that has popped up in the card above. I'm going to leave the link to my Lucchini Gambit tutorial video in the comment section down below. And just to spoil it a little bit, after pawn to f5, if white plays knight g5, trying to take advantage of the weak f7 square, you can simply go pawn to f4, disconnecting the bishop from the knight. Point is, after knight f7, now you simply go queen h4, sacrificing your rook, because if they take, you're going to checkmate them like that. If they castle short, guess what? Now you attack their knight like this with knight h6. Point is, if they go ahead and take your rook, which appears to be free, you simply go knight g4, intending to checkmate on h2, like what we saw in the Busch-Gass Gambit. If they play pawn to h3, once again, you simply take on f2, like what we saw before. Knight takes f2 comes with an attack on the queen. If white gets frustrated and takes your knight, you take with your queen. This time if king h1, the move you want to play is unbelievable. Let's see how many of you guys watched and followed my Lucchini Gambit very well. What correct move do you play from here? Let's go. Great. The move is pawn to f3, because you simply want to take on g2 and that'll be checkmate. If queen takes f3, you're going to checkmate white on g1 with your queen, supported by your dark squad bishop. And if pawn takes, now you follow it up with the move pawn to d5, your key move in the Nc3 Gambit. Point is, you are simply attacking the light squad bishop, so if anything, that's the piece you are going to take. If bishop takes or pawn takes, you have a mate in 3, which I would love you guys to find right now. Please leave your answers in the comment section down below. I'm going to shout out your names in my next video.